Are you ready to add a digital executive to your C-suite? What about an intelligent enterprise operating system? What problems do they solve and for who? And how would you get on the wait list for an AI platform that can change the direction of your entire company? Hi, I'm Courtney Baker, and this is AI Know-How from Knownwell, helping you reimagine your business in the AI era. As always, I'm joined by Knownwell CEO David DeWolf, Chief Strategy Officer Pete Buer, and Chief Product Officer Mohan Rao. We'll be having an extended discussion with David and Mohan today about the genesis of Knownwell and how it can help you. But first, the news. Pete Buer joins us as always to break down some of the latest AI headlines and how they apply to your business. Hey, Pete, long time no see.
Hey, Courtney. How are you?
First up, Deloitte is getting into the AI game in a big way. The Financial Times reports that 75,000 Deloitte employees will be given access to a homegrown tool they're calling Pair D. Pete, what stands out to you here?
I think it's just the best bit of evidence to support the claim we've been making that AI transformation is coming to professional services in a big and fast and impactful way. So here in consulting alone, we've got Deloitte launching a co-pilot type tool for 75,000 employees. Recently, we referenced some Bain data that 40% labor time improvement is possible in professional services through the use of AI. There is a revolution underway. Pragmatically, inside the article, there's an interesting trade-off teed up around build versus buy. You know, Deloitte has chosen to build its own tool. They have resources. They have amazing data, I'm sure, and models, and presumably the combination of those factors and their confidence that they have something distinctive to offer, is the reason that they went with the build option. But there are buy options for companies that don't have all those resources and assets at their disposal. But of course, the buy option requires cost. And who knows what Deloitte would have had to pay were they to have gone outside to build and to access someone else's resources. And so at a smaller level, executives listening in on the podcast will have this question to kick around for themselves. Do you hire a firm to build it for you specifically? Do you build it yourself? Do you access it through some third party who's got something good up and running?
Yeah, I, for one, would love to raise my hands to see the financials that impacted this decision, to see, obviously, not just the build, but the ongoing maintenance and the technology continuing to evolve at a really rapid rate and the investment that takes. But very interesting to see how Deloitte has chosen, the path that they've chosen currently, at least.
I think for the large consulting firms, they distinguish themselves on the quality of their IP. And so putting power behind that makes total sense.
Yep. Okay, so next, one of the biggest stories of the last few weeks has been the New York Times lawsuit against Microsoft and OpenAI. The Hill recently had a good breakdown of the case and the possible implications. It's headlined, New York Times ChatGPT lawsuit poses new legal threats to artificial intelligence. What's the takeaway here for business leaders?
So we've seen versions of this all over the news. This is the biggest case, the highest profile case. And I think there's a cautionary tale here for businesses that are down the path to be super careful about where your data is coming from. Be extra vigilant on what you can control. Make sure your own data is perfectly buttoned up. But the third-party data that you incorporate is deserving of some scrutiny and some guarantees from the providers that you're getting it from. And I guess that's not just that sounded like a policy statement or a protocol statement, but I think there are training implications here too, right? There's a pretty meaningful chain of employees and teams who are touching, using, sourcing data up and down, and they all need to be on the same page and be managing risk on behalf of the organization. So worth putting some thought into that, not just your own employees, but the ecosystem as well. The article predicts that the Times and OpenAI will come to some sort of agreement about how licensing of the content can be done, and I'm sure that that's probably right. And I think also it's good advice for everyone listening to make sure their legal teams are following this carefully, to understand the nuances of what the decisions are in the end, because we will all presumably be facing some kind of questions around confidence and risk management over data use. So why not be as smart as you possibly can to head off at the pass any potential such eventualities.
Thank you, Pete. That is very helpful and always a good reminder as we engage in this transformative technology. As always, thanks for joining us.
Love it, Courtney. Take care.
Our team has been busy working, conceptualizing, and building a platform that you know as our company name, Knownwell. We've been working with companies across the globe on really uncovering what problems they have in their organizations and how we can solve it with AI. So today we're going to be giving you an inside look at Knownwell and how it can help you specifically retain your hard-won clients. David, Mohan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Courtney.
Hey, Courtney. Hey, David.
Hi, Mohan.
Okay, I want to do something interesting today. Last week, we talked about the boardroom. What's happening? What are the problems that boards are struggling with, wrestling with, trying to find solutions to? And sometimes if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it really quickly. Sometimes these problems are almost competitive in nature with one another, which makes them even harder to solve. So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about Knownwell. And I want to talk about how we are actually working to solve those problems. So David, Mohan, I'm going to turn you two loose on this to tell the audience about Knownwell and what we're building.
Yeah, we're pretty excited because we've spent a lot of time talking to customers, talking with the market, and figuring out these problems that they're struggling with. And just a quick recap for those that didn't listen. Number one, information overload. Organizations are just really struggling to digest all the data they have. Number two, they're not translating that into action, right? They're struggling to make sense of it so they can drive execution, right? And then number three, they are ignoring relevant data that exists outside of their managed data, what's readily available, not in their modern data stack, but communications and natural information on the web, all that kind of stuff. So that's the big meta picture. And then very acutely, we see over and over again in boardrooms, organizations are really struggling with what I call client or customer intelligence, really knowing what their customers think about their services, what they think about the relationship they have with them, what is the health and status of their customer, what are they dealing with, right? There's so much information over there, they can't digest it all, right? So that's the context, that's the backdrop. The other thing we've heard over and over again is that organizations, businesses are longing. They are thirsting for a vision of, what does this AI in my business look like? You have heard us talk about the execution versus the operations level. AI is being used to drive execution in organizations, right? Helping a salesperson be more productive, helping a software engineer be more productive. But leaders, boardrooms are saying, we know this is going to transform business. How is the business going to operate differently? And as we have heard all these different conversations, what we've envisioned is a world where the AI is actually the operating system for the business. Really, think about a lot of these execution tools are co-pilots. Well, a similar analogy exists in the leadership world. In the military, you have an executive officer to a commander. What is the executive officer? The executive officer is the second in command whose job is to process all of the information, everything going on, connect dots, and drive execution, hold people accountable so that the commander can stay focused on what only the commander can do. Strategy, planning, the big concepts and ideas, and can have decisions teed up, just make decisions and go. what are we building at Knownwell? Knownwell is your executive officer. It is the CEO, the COOs. It is the chief operator of the organization. It is their executive officer. So we are building a digital tool that is leveraging AI to be your CXO, right? A new member of your executive team, and help the other leaders of the organization consume all of this information, make sense of it, and also connect the dots of it. And, oh, by the way, go get the 80%, 90% of information we ignore today because it's not managed, it's not structured, it's not in our modern data stack. All of that too we'll pay attention to, make sense of that, to tee up very high leverage decisions so that organizations are more efficient, more effective, and more productive.
Could you just do a little double click, to steal a David term, on what is uniquely different about what you've described?
So most of what's in the market is a very rules-based system, right? So if X and Y happen, you get an alert, that sort of thing. But what if you don't know what X and Y are? That's where the power of AI comes in, to have these flexible rules where the information can be generated because of its flexibility, and for these alerts to come to you as opposed to you having to log in to find out. That is something that is different. The other thing that's different in what we are building is we don't care about organizational charts in a company. We are looking at this holistically as a client portfolio and be able to infer judgments collectively that is, we think, is much more powerful than looking at it function by function within a company.
So I want to ask it this way. I was recently on another podcast, and as I was talking about what we're building at Knownwell, the host asked me, he said, so is it kind of like when I'm watching Sunday Night Football and the Philadelphia Eagles is on the 10-yard line, and that panel pops up with all the information about the play that the coach should run? And the way that I answered it, and I would love to know if you think this is true, was yes, it is all of those things, but it's also that you shouldn't pick a play with your running back because their heart rate is elevated. It is this outside factor that wasn't even on your radar. The coach already knows that he has to pick a play and that he needs to know the probability of which play to choose. But what we're talking about is actually knowing something that in some ways is unknowable in that moment. What do you think about that? What would you add to that analogy?
I'd add that you're brilliant. I think that's an awesome
I
I think you're just bragging
right?
now, to
Yes.
be honest with you. I think that's exactly right. And that's part, going back to last episode and the recap we did at the beginning, that's part of the world we're struggling in, is we have so much information and data. It's hard to make a decision of what play to run right now as I have to do it. And, oh, by the way, in that, I should be adding more information to that because there's other things that should factor into that I'm ignoring that are probably even more powerful than what I'm even seeing. And it's exactly what you're saying, right? It's not only the heart rate, it's also, hey, maybe there's a way to detect that the linebacker on the other side that always crushes things on the left-hand side of the line is exhausted as well and picked that up. And like, how do we get all of that and leverage the power of all this information, but do it in a way that is being that co-pilot, that CXO for the leader to be able to make crisp decisions, and then, oh, by the way, drive the execution through the organization and help everybody else see it and implement and execute it. And then recursively learning more and more, right? Once that play is run, was it effective, and what ones of those factors actually played out? And then next time around, we're even better at it.
So I can see a ton of ways this platform could be used throughout an organization. I could go on, but I'd love for you to talk about what's the first use case, what's the first problem that we're going to be solving for organizations?
Yeah, goes back to the problems we were talking about before, right? What do we hear? We heard all these data problems, but we also heard customer retention, customer growth, customer intelligence, right? So really what we heard over and over again was customer intelligence, employee intelligence was up there, market intelligence, meaning my competitive set, like what's going on in the market, and then operating intelligence. How do I know what work streams are getting in the way, not operating optimally, all those types of things. But what was loudest was customer intelligence. Organizations, and the data backs this up, by the way, right? The data clearly shows that a 5% increase in customer retention can drive somewhere between a 25 and 95% increase in profitability, right? Then there's all the data on how much more expensive it is to land a new client versus you working with your existing one, how your growth rates go up if you retain your clients, all really powerful bottom line driven ROI around customer retention and growth. So we're starting by applying this operating system to customer intelligence. And oh, by the way, here's the side benefit. For years, organizations have been talking about customer intimacy and being customer centric. But as I've gone in and I've poked into organizations, their ability to actually design operations and to execute against client priorities is next to nil. Why? Because they don't have real insight and intelligence on their customers. It's a gap. So they say, and they want to be, and they mean to be customer centric, but right now it simply means I invest in my client experience team, my client success team, not that I'm planning and prioritizing my operations in order to delight my customers and to retain them. That is true customer centricity. And that's the value of us building this operating system, starting with the customer.
Hey guys, it's Courtney. I'm breaking in here really quickly. We're going to have more with Mohan and David in just a second. But if you're already interested in getting to know more about what we're discussing in this episode, I want to invite you to join our beta waitlist. You can do that right now at knownwell.com. And now let's get back to the conversation. Mohan, can you help us understand what that's going to look like? How are those warnings? If we talk about what we just talked about, that proactive intelligence, and then we take this problem of we all want to retain more clients. This marketer right here will raise both hands for that all day long. How do we keep more of the people that we bring in? What does that look like? How might that practically look in an organization?
Courtney, this is the way I would answer it. What our product is going to provide is a peer in the senior operating team. It is going to be the CXO of the senior operations team. That's the positioning that we are looking for. So there may be about, depending on the company, 20 or so people who may have access to our application, although we can make it available to everybody if it's so desired. The idea is that the senior team is getting proactive, priority-based alerting that is predictive in nature. So they can then rapidly respond to customer issues that are emerging and be able to take care of it. Furthermore, we want this to be a dashboard that shows the health of the client portfolio based on not only the structured data that's there in various ERPs and CRMs, but also be able to look at the natural information flows and be able to develop a client health network map on which they can act. So as the senior team is looking at this and saying these are point issues or these are systemic issues, be able to devise plans against these problems that are emerging and be able to solve them systematically is going to be the key. And as they execute on that, they should be able to see that feedback loop emerge in the dashboards. That is what we're creating. It is an entirely new category of application product out there, and we're super excited about it.
Mohan, just on that last point, I think about this a lot of times in terms of the advent of enterprise software as it exists today, right? We started off with databases. Databases provided us so much information, but we didn't know what to do with it. So we layered on top of that an application layer that managed the input and the output of that automated workflows, right? Those became our ERPs and our CRMs of today. And that's what we think of as enterprise software today, not the database, right? Well, we're now in the next generation of enterprise software, and that will be an intelligence layer that sits on top of the information layer that sits on top of the data layer. And we are building the world's first intelligent operating system as that first aspect of that intelligence layer. And it is all about not just intelligence, but the orchestration, right? That's why it's an operating system. It's not just a new BI tool, right? This is about the orchestration of work. How do we make sure we drive the execution, which is why what you were talking about around that proactive intelligence is so important, is because the reality is right now, these SaaS platforms, you have to go disrupt your workflow to go find out the information you need to know. Let's turn that on its head and say, let's give you the information you need to know when you need to know it, even when you don't know that you're going to need to know it, right? And so one of the concepts here is this idea of an intelligent user experience that we will be building, which is all about getting to know you personally. And how do you drive your day-to-day activities? How do we drive execution within the workforce by meeting the workforce where they're at? So if I drive my day off of email, then it's going to email me. If you drive yours off of Salesforce, I'm actually going to go drive you through Salesforce. Courtney, she's all about text messages. We're going to drive her text messages. Like, everybody's different. We're going to have smart user experience that meets you where it's at and really drives the execution, which is what the operating system is about. It's leveraging intelligence to drive crisp execution and performance excellence.
I don't know if I want it out in the world that I'm driven by text messages for
I'm
the
not
record.
by email.
That's
I made
it up. Okay, before we wrap this episode, I'd love to get from both of you just, again, some practical, what is this technology going to look like when it's executing in an organization?
Let me give an example from the book Power in Production by Ajay Agarwal and others, in which they provide an analogy of what happened during the COVID pandemic. When we didn't know any better, the rule was everybody should be 6 feet or 2 meters apart, right? That's how most organizations are run. They are very rules-based, whether it made sense or not. And obviously the effects of it will be with us for a very long period of time because it was a very blunt instrument. But what if we had information and predictions that said so-and-so should really quarantine themselves, but the vast majority didn't have to do that? It would have been a much more effective system. Obviously, this is with hindsight, this example is being given. So in an organization, if you can imagine, where people have good information, but also predictive information of what could happen, and we all understand these are probabilistic in nature, organizations can be defined in a much better way so that then the human judgment can be applied and problems can be solved faster and get the outcomes that you want, as opposed to a very static rules-based organization.
Mohan, let me take the example we've been talking about, maybe paint a picture of what true customer intelligence might look like in the future, right? And let's go back to this goal so many organizations have right now of retaining their customers. If you go look, not only are customers leaving, but service providers are really struggling to be able to predict it and to know. And if you look at why, it's because as an organization scales, it becomes more and more difficult for a leader to sit in the middle of all of the conversations going on. And the reality of how you predict the customer churn in this world is not rules-based. It's not, if this happens, then they will leave. Or if these three things happen, they will leave. What it is that gut feeling that you were talking about of how leaders run organizations. It's, you know what? I noticed that this person who's never late for a meeting was actually late for 2 meetings in a row. And you know what? I've noticed that they're being a little sketchy. They're not answering my questions directly. And oh my gosh, that invoice, it's paid late. They're never late on their invoices, or they always pay 7 days late, but this one was 27 days late, right? And oh, by the way, on LinkedIn, I just noticed that an executive left and changed. That's our executive sponsor, right? They're now at a different organization. It is connecting the dots, and it is taking these probabilistic things and seeing that they add up to this client is at risk. What we can do in this intelligent operating system using AI is we can process all of those communication channels so much faster at scale because leaders can't sit in the middle of all of them and notice all of them. And we can then infer those judgments and figure out probabilistically, well ahead of when any other leader's gut would fire, that, oh my gosh, this client must be at risk. And oh, by the way, because of all of those different factors that go into it, we can then look at why and what do we do about it. Now, having run large organizations where multiple customer relationships exist, here's what I know. Today, those leadership guts fire, but they fire differently in different people. Some people are good at it, some people aren't. But in most organizations, when you are processing communication flows as the reason for potential churn or customer health not being optimal, there's a lot of disagreement sometimes in different perspectives, right? We can take that bias out, right? The traditional sales versus delivery saying it's sales fault and they set expectations wrong, and sales saying it's delivery's problem and quality is the issue, right? It goes away because now we can actually figure out the real customer perspective. What is the client intelligence? What is the customer actually saying? Let's read the tone of that email and say, you know what, the tone is this way, and here's why. And we can give the playbook and be that XO going to the commanding officer and saying, here's what we should do because we have a problem. That's what we're going to do.
David, Mohan, this was really helpful. Thank you for diving into all things Knownwell and what the platform is going to be able to do in our businesses. If you're listening today and thinking, hey, how do I find out more about Knownwell and Knownwell Client Intelligence? You can join our beta waitlist at knownwell.com. It's easy and you'll be in the know and on our list to reach out to get a preview of what's happening. David, Mohan, thank you as always.
It was great. Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, Mohan.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks as always for listening and watching. Don't forget to give us a hopefully 5-star rating on your podcast player of choice. And we'd really appreciate it, maybe more than anything else, if you would share this show with another executive or post about it on social media. Before we go, we always like to ask one of our AI friends what they think about the episode. Hey, ChatGPT, today we're talking about client retention and how we can utilize AI to help us retain our hard-won clients. So what do you think? What is your opinion on how we should leverage you?
Leveraging AI to retain clients can be highly effective when used to personalize customer experiences and predict client needs. Additionally, AI-driven analytics can provide insights into client behavior, enabling businesses to proactively address issues and tailor services to enhance client satisfaction and loyalty.
And now you're in the know. Thanks as always for listening. We'll see you next week with more headlines, roundtable discussion, and interviews with AI experts.